Welcome to Cornwall Insights podcast. My name is Vicky Merrison and I'm the marketing manager at Cornwall Insights. Today, I'm joined by a number of my colleagues for a special podcast to celebrate International Women's Day 2021. With me is Emma Bill, Naomi Potter, Ruth Young and Catherine Edwards. We wanted to share with you how we started out in the industry and how we've progressed to where we are today or where we hope to be in the future. We'll also talk about the importance of having women represented in the industry and in leadership roles. So Emma, do you want to kick me off and tell me a little bit about what you do at Cornwall Insight?
Thanks, Vicky. So I'm Emma and I work in the regulation team at Cornwall Insight. I specialise in energy supplier compliance and faster switching. Also support the supplier forums, which are monthly, bringing together suppliers within the industry. And I've recently been getting to know the Irish regs and policy side of things, which has been quite interesting as well. So I joined Cornwall Insight in October 2017. And in between then and now, I did take out a 9-month period to have my second baby. So I came back because, it's a fascinating industry. There's lots to learn. And I definitely enjoy that. My background is environmental science and geography. I know a few others at Cornwall also have a similar background. But before, I guess I sort of discovered energy, I was focused on transport, so sustainable and active transport, and worked in a number of research roles in different universities and also at a national charity. So I guess, from sort of academia to charity and now being at Cornwall, I really enjoy the current environment I'm in.
Yeah, and you've got a really wide breadth of experience there as well, going from all those different roles in your career. So Ruth, tell me a little bit about what you do at Cornwall.
Sure, yeah. So I'm in the consultancy team in the Dublin office. So generally, we're more focused on the Irish market, but we do tend to overlap a little bit and work together with the GB team quite often. And generally, I guess we're in the kind of advisory work. So any of the consultancy projects that come our way, just around, could be market entry, it could be kind of revenue optimization. There's a huge kind of breadth of projects that we tend to be involved in, but my specialism tends to be around the wholesale electricity market. So that's the actual markets themselves, but also a lot around the kind of policy and governance in place for those. So in terms of my background, really, I studied physics and then started out my career in energy in GB. I joined a graduate scheme in the UK and stayed with that company for about 7 years before coming back to Ireland. So I've tended to always kind of being in that wholesale electricity market area, whether it be in the UK or Ireland.
Thanks, Ruth. Emma and Ruth, how important do you think it is to have those positive female role models in the industry?
Sure, yeah. So I think, just speaking from my own kind of personal experience, I definitely feel like, partially my kind of journey into the energy industry was maybe a little bit of a fluke into it, and I wasn't entirely sure until I was in my 20s that even what the opportunities were available to myself in the energy industry. So I think if there was maybe a bit more visibility there of kind of female role models, especially in sort of leadership roles that tend to be maybe more sort of visible in the public, I think it maybe would have made my career trajectory a little bit simpler from, say, university stage upwards.
I completely agree, actually, with Ruth about visibility. And you mentioned, Ruth, the public as well. I think that is also important. And I guess I also joined energy it wasn't my intended plan. When I came out of uni, as I said, I was sort of focused on sort of transport, and there are parallels there as well. But I think the importance really of female leadership in energy is basically so you can come in and you can see what is possible. You can see where your career could go, rather than just sort of saying, do you know what, I'm happy here, I'm not going to go for that role because a little bit out of my reach, or whatever things we might say to ourselves often. And I speak for myself now, often I've sort of lacked the confidence to to put myself forward for more senior roles. And there are at Cornwall, we're here today, and my manager as well. There are a number of female role models who I look up to. And so I think visibility, just being there, and also having someone who has been through it so they can give you guidance on what to do, speed up the process a little bit as well.
Totally agree. I think, like, the visibility, it just kind of hits every stage, doesn't it? It draws you into the energy industry. If there's female role models there, once you're in the industry, then it helps you with your kind of career progression, seeing someone who's kind of progressed up through the career ladder. But it also, I guess, kind of helps in terms of feeling like you're represented in the senior leadership roles in a company as well. It is good. So even just from like company policies, things like that, I guess you feel like you're represented from that perspective as well.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point. And your point as well, Emma, about the confidence. It's about building up your confidence. And if you see women in those board level roles, you can see that they've got there, and you can speak to them and find out how they got there and how they did it. So I think that's really important point on confidence. Naomi, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I joined Cornwall Insight about 6 months ago, and something that I was like really impressed with from the get-go was how there was diversity of women, of genders throughout the teams, and also throughout the whole company. Or not only does it represent a more diverse and thoughtful body of people in the workplace, but also it does help with sort of having people to look up to and to think, well, that's their career path. And also in terms of taking maternity leave, being able to understand how that can fit in within your career and how you can still reach top roles.
Yeah, absolutely. You can be a mother and have a great career at the same time. I think that's a really important point. Naomi, tell us a little bit about what you do at Cornwall and how you started your career.
Yeah, so I'm Naomi, and I joined Cornwall Insight, as I said, about 6 months ago. I currently work as a retail analyst, and my role mainly focuses on looking at market competition. I produce the domestic market share survey and the quarterly DCIS, as well as the monthly media sweeps, which are sent out to some of our clients. So I graduated in 2019. About a year and a half ago from LSE, where I'd studied social sciences, so slightly different to Ruth and Emma. But my real interests within my degree were in natural resource use and climate change, and just in general, that drew me towards the energy industry, which is obviously changing a lot in reaction to climate change, and obviously also is very much rooted in how we use our natural resources. At first, I pursued some work in journalism, but I found that that sort of work didn't make use of my quant skills, and so I transitioned over to working in more project work within Cornwall Insight, and so far it's been going really great.
That's great. That's really good to hear. So you're obviously quite new to the industry, and having graduated about 18 months ago. When you were at university, did you see many female role models? Was there many out there that you could look up to?
Definitely, yeah. While at university, my university is definitely big on diversity, and it tended not to matter on the subject. I mean, there was definitely more people in history courses that were female and then in economics there was more males, but in general it was quite mixed. And in terms of the teaching staff, it was definitely very mixed. That's something that I'm very, very grateful for, because it made sure that I understood what opportunities were open to me, and also made sure I never felt like an outsider in a particular subject, which I had felt a bit at my school when I was a little bit younger, in terms of in science classes, just feeling a little bit like, oh, yeah, I don't really necessarily match to all the other boys in here.
That's really good to hear. Yeah, it really sounds like you had those positive female role models as you progressed into your education. And I guess it goes back to that confidence point again, that you saw those role models and it gave you the confidence to progress in the career that you wanted. Catherine, it'd be great to hear your thoughts. If you just tell us a little bit about what you do at Cornwall, and talk to us about what you do there.
Hi, Vicky. Thank you. Yes. Hi, my name is Catherine. I've been working at Cornwall Insight now for about the past almost year and a half. I started September 2019. I am a research analyst there, so I focus on supporting with any consultancy projects we have going on. I also help support the subscription side of our services as well. So I'm kind of between those two, primarily focusing at the moment a little bit more on supporting on projects. Similar to Naomi, however, I actually have my background in education is pretty much very social studies oriented. So I studied politics and philosophy and leadership in undergrad, and then went on to get my master's in international politics in Ireland, which brought me to work with Ruth in the Dublin office at Cornwall Insight. I think I also happened to stumble into the energy industry. It was kind of a combination of being a broke grad student frantically looking for a job, and also, my education background is not in energy. However, I do find energy tends to be very political. And I also have always had a passion for climate change and sustainability in agriculture particularly, and transport as well. So when I found Cornwall Insight, at least, I found that they kind of suited all those interests up front. And I think kind of going back to an earlier theme regarding confidence, I know I was very nervous at first when I applied for the position at Cornwall Insight, because I was like, oh my gosh, is this just going to waste my time? This is an energy consulting company. I have no background in energy. But because I was kind of passionate about the field, I really thought, hey, okay, what's the worst that's going to happen? They're just going to say no, right? So I think confidence is key. And I think that is something that tends to, I don't want to generalize, but I think sometimes women tend to struggle with it perhaps more than men. And I think just taking that initial step of saying like, hey, I don't necessarily tick all the boxes here, but I'm going to apply for the job anyway. I think I was chatting to some friends earlier about this, but I think that when presented with, like, for example, a job application, women tend to see, oh, hey, I don't necessarily check all the boxes, so I'm not going to apply to it. Whereas men look at it and see, oh, I have like a couple of these, I'm going to go ahead and just go for it, apply for it. I think sometimes that can definitely hold us back. And I think confidence in just going for it is key. And I really do think that that's something that we can work on promoting a bit more just amongst, I think, women in general, and supporting it and saying, like, you don't need necessarily a background in energy to work in it. You just need a passion. And I think, everyone is smart and capable, and half the battle is pretty much just showing up and doing it. But in terms of kind of going out and having that attitude and being aggressive and just going for it, I think that's really, really key.
I just have a question, Catherine, just on one of the things you mentioned, and I think it's so true about, again, coming back to that point on confidence, and maybe when you're applying for a job, like, do you, or does anyone here think that if the hiring manager was a woman, it would make any difference to that confidence when applying to the job?
I think that I'm trying to think back to my experience now. When I applied, actually, the Dublin office was still a very small office, which I think kind of helped make it feel both a little bit more welcoming and open, but also a little bit intimidating going in. And when I went through the hiring process, I was talking with my manager, who was male. And obviously, one thing in general that's been nice for me is I find the culture to be very welcoming. But I will say, like, I didn't even know the demographics of the team when I applied. And it was a bit intimidating, not because my hiring manager was male, but just because it was a smaller environment. The two people I did interview with were male, and it was before I met the rest of the team. And it was just, wanted to be, I think, just an extra boost of confidence to make me, especially, I kind of felt like I had a bit of a imposter syndrome going on with being like, oh my gosh, I gotta, make sure they don't, obviously they knew I didn't have a background in energy because they read my application, but really just that extra confidence was key to be like, I really have to impress these guys to show them that, I can be an asset here and play on the team, so to speak.
Yeah, I also obviously recently interviewed at Cornwall, and I remember logging on for my interview, and on the screen it was a male and a female name, and just, yeah, there was definitely a sense in me of feeling a little bit more confident, and I guess just being aware that at least one of the interviewers would just have that level of empathy that maybe a woman would have when interviewing another woman, and just understanding maybe if I was to come across as a bit shy or something, just because I obviously have this feeling of maybe feeling a little less confident and a little less forthright, and just knowing that maybe I would be understood a bit better by the two interviewers. I was then handed on to Anna, who is now my current manager, and yeah, having my chat with her again was just really nice, and I felt very confident, and I've always been very grateful to have her as a team leader, because she really does have that level of empathy and understanding, which I think perhaps comes through sort of sharing gender and having that like understanding of each other.
Yeah, no, I'd definitely come in there on that point. Thinking it back on my experiences at Cornwall, having gone away, I had a baby, so I was away for 9 months, and throughout that period stayed in touch with my team, and when I came back, it was very welcoming. And I think that is the importance of sort of diversity, whether it's in an interview or within a team. It's having people around you that understand your situation. And I'm thinking of COVID-19 now, and sort of what we've been through in the last year or so, and how, I felt supported by my team, particularly, and other team members, senior women in the company who've, ensured that I've been able to deliver what I'm given, particularly obviously having kids at home, and some of the deliverables we have, external facing courses and things like that. I took the decision to step back from some of those. And I think it's also an acknowledgement that, do you know what, this is a unique situation, and people understand that it's hard, and having people around you that understand that has been really useful to me, and I definitely feel supported from senior women at Cornwall.
Yeah, I think, Emma, from what you have said, and Catherine, you brought it up as well, is about culture. Whilst I think we all identify that as women, we feel that other women will show us more empathy and give us more confidence, it's actually about the culture of a company as well. And I think that's really important in how we all act with each other. And I think at Cornwall, we do try really hard to bring that culture, and everyone is incredibly passionate about what they do. I think that's the one thing that I could say about everybody, is their passion for what they do and for the people they work with is fantastic. And I think that really says a lot and breeds that culture that encourages diversity.
Yeah, no, definitely. Everyone is super passionate and gets the job done and works together to do that. I was just going to mention a point around sort of what I've benefited from Cornwall. I mean, this was before COVID. The policies of flexibility. I've been fortunate enough to be able to work flexibly, work from home. And again, this was sort of pre-COVID. So I think policies like that will definitely benefit women. If women are sort of time constrained in the mornings and things like that, it definitely does help to have those flexible policies to be able to work from home, and that is really important. Obviously online working as well, you can't always do the long traveling, so yeah, I think from a practical sort of point of view, those things are very important for any company to have.
Yeah, I think that's really true, Emma. And I guess something else we could consider is how we ensure diversity and energy, not only for ourselves and for our fellow teammates, but also because of the idea that net zero and what we're working towards is very much all in sort of action that requires a great group effort across the entire generation. Does anyone have any thoughts on that?
I'm being distracted by noises. Sorry. Kids are just running up the stairs. I don't know if anyone wants to go, feel free.
Well, I think I guess to build on that in terms of the overall objective of achieving climate goals and carbon neutrality targets, it is a group effort, and I think that effort is combined both of companies like ourselves trying to advise policy groups or consumer councils or anything like that. And then in addition, those actual groups as well. I think diversity across the spectrum there is important, because not only will it lead into a diverse set of ideas and different ways of thinking, I think it can also help draw on different experiences, learned experiences, looking across the board, sharing with each other what works, what doesn't work, why not, why might it work in this context but not in another. I think that's all important, and that really can only happen or even be facilitated with a diverse group of ideas, which I think inherently come from a diverse group of people who have different backgrounds, who have different lived experiences, and who have maybe even different beliefs. I think that is to your point, I think very important to achieving these goals. And again, the only way I think that's going to happen is by promoting diversity in the workplace, both gender, race, sexuality. I think it's definitely something that is needed, because I think traditionally across, all jobs pretty much, and I think at least for sure the Western Europe and the Western area is all tend to be very male, tend to be very white, tend to be like kind of older. And I think what we're working to change now is kind of breaking norms, breaking standards is going to be necessary in order to achieve any sort of progress going forward, or any goals that we've set is going to be necessary to kind of break that entrenched status quo.
Yeah, absolutely, Catherine. Absolutely. I have one final question. So, how do we encourage girls who are looking to get into the sciences? How do we encourage that diversity? And what would we say to them? Those girls thinking of taking that career path.
Such a tricky one to answer, really. I think pretty much everyone here has said that they've kind of fallen into the energy industry somewhat. Which we've all kind of come from different places, of different backgrounds, and yet it was just a kind of a fluke that we ended up in it. So I think there's definitely more about the visibility. From my own personal perspective, I totally agree with what Catherine was saying earlier, that you don't need to kind of come from the sciences. But I found, for me, I was encouraged in school to take up kind of maths and physics, which I had no intention of doing. And then when I went into university, I actually kind of studied arts as well for a while, and then changed into physics. So, I almost tried my hardest to not go down this route, and yet I still fell into it. And I love it now. I just didn't know that it was an option for me. I don't know for anyone else, but I found when I was in school, I only knew about jobs that you could explain with one word. So like doctor, lawyer, science meant scientist. I didn't know that there was this whole world of energy industry available to me.
Yeah, I would really agree with that. I would also echo, I think part of the answer that will come from the question, how do we encourage women in STEM? Really, I think to answer that question, you have to look into, well, what is it about the way it's set up right now that isn't as encouraging or doesn't make it as accessible, if women don't even know about it? And I think kind of talking about those questions, and I think it can definitely bring up some maybe uncomfortable discourse about the way things are currently set up. But I think those are definitely necessary in order to answer, well, how do we then change it so that it does become more accessible, it does become more friendly, it does even change, I don't know, gender norms about, what is traditionally a male or female role. I think that would be very important as well.
Yeah, I think I would add that one of the things I think we could do as a society really is energy is obviously something we experience every day, and sort of just bringing that to young people, bringing it to their attention, how energy is produced, how it's used, how it's important, that kind of thing. I think young people are a lot more mobilized in terms of climate action and that kind of thing now, but talking to young people about how energy impacts your day to day, I think is really important, be that male, female. And yeah, I think it all comes down to, as we've discussed, visibility. And I think from one of the things I've definitely benefited from in my career is sort of social media, and following key individuals, female influencers in the energy industry on Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever it is, and looking at them and looking at how they interact, and basically role modeling their behaviors. And I think it's really important, if we can't see women in the workplace or on the television, I think social media is definitely a good place to start, and it's full of inspiring women in the energy industry.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I'd like to kind of echo back to some of the earlier things we were talking about in terms of women in leadership positions, and how to get there, and some things to do to kind of promote that change and progress kind of the gender parity among top positions. Is I think it's really important to, from a young age, teach kids that, especially I think women, that say what you mean, say what's on your mind. Like, I think oftentimes women tend to, even I've noticed it, like when I write an email or something, I'll say, sorry about blah, 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 but could you do this? Or like, if you have the time, blah, 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 could you get back to me? Or please, or like, hey, exclamation mark. I think it's important to really mimic what we're seeing amongst, male colleagues or men in leadership position, and just kind of, don't be afraid to be quote unquote rude. I think, and I don't even mean rude, because I don't think it is rude. I think that we've been socialized, we've been preconditioned to think that, oh, when, a woman says something straight to the point, she's curt, or she's very short, or she's difficult to work with. And I think, we have these implicit biases that when a man does it, oh, he knows what he's doing, he knows the direction he wants to take, he's being a good leader, he's delegating, blah, 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 blah. And I think that it's really important, especially from a young age, to teach that, especially to, I guess, both men too, that, our boys, like, no, she's just, doing the same thing you're doing, basically. I think in one of my courses in college, actually, I was taking a leadership class, and we were doing a lot of work on implicit biases. And it was so interesting to see how oftentimes, like, the same descriptors for both men and women in leadership positions tended to result in men being thought of as good leaders, as, they're doing their job, it's a business, and women almost being thought of as like, oh, she's kind of a bitch, she's really short, she, like, all that type of stuff. And I think it's so important to progress this change, to change that narrative, and to kind of really, I don't want to like derail this conversation too much, but there's this trend on TikTok currently that's like showing a bunch of women who are like, I'm going to change my email style to mimic that of my male coworkers, and then after they send their email, they're like shaking. And I think, like, obviously it was a joke, but there are truths to that. And I think that it's important to change that, and change that fear, and just say, hey, look, no, I'm not being emotional or sensitive. I'm doing my job just like you are. So I think just kind of changing those implicit biases will also lead to a big step in progress forward.
I totally agree on the implicit biasness, but I feel like I have a slightly different take on it. I think that when you're in a male-dominated industry, or just, I guess, society as a whole, it tends to, like, masculine qualities, I guess, tend to be seen as how you succeed. And I wouldn't consider emulating it as the way to kind of break through. I would see more, if women start to progress and get to, like, kind of leadership roles, then it should start to show that femininity is not something that's inferior to masculinity or masculine tendencies. And therefore, and I guess agreeing with one of your points, Catherine, like, you know, if you tend to phrase an email in a what could be considered by society a kind of more feminine way, that's not a weakness. That neither of those traits are better or worse than each other. And I think that probably goes back to some of the stuff that we were talking about earlier around, you know, you can only really kind of frame things around what you know. So again, if it's a male dominated industry, you may only know how to attract kind of young men into the industry because you don't know what would appeal or what would become visible to get kind of younger women into the industry. But if you have a kind of a strong representation of women throughout the whole chain within that industry, then they kind of understand how to then start reaching out and becoming visible and encouraging women in. And it should, I guess, hopefully help around some of those confidence issues then, because women aren't seeing their own qualities as being inferior to anybody else.
That's actually such a good point. I really agree with that. You're right in saying that we shouldn't label as one being, you know, superior or inferior based off of how we gauge success.
Thank you, everyone. Does anyone else have anything that they would like to add?
I guess just one totally kind of out of the blue thing that came just popped into my head. But I think another thing about having a good kind of representation of women in Cornwall Insight is that it's just a better reflection of our customers as well. You need a diverse culture within our company to reflect diverse culture in the rest of the industry, really.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Ruth. You know, like you said, Cornwall Insight does have a really diverse culture, and if other companies do the same, then it becomes the norm. It becomes what everyone knows, and then those role models, those women in leadership roles are there, and it's regular. I think it sounds like there's a lot more that needs to be done, perhaps on an awareness piece for women who want to get into the sciences, and particularly into the energy industry. I think all of you have alluded to that it wasn't quite there for you in school, but when you got to university, it was a lot more prevalent, and you really understood then that those opportunities were out there. So perhaps, that there is more of an awareness piece, at that younger age. And Emma and Catherine, you alluded to it as well. Social media, it's such a huge part of our lives now, and that's a great way to get that message out there.
I was thinking about a tool which could be particularly useful for getting young women into the energy industry, which is setting up diversity internships where you particularly permit certain groups, certain demographics to apply, and for those internships to be paid, because I think one real barrier can be just getting that first job. And kind of like Ruth was saying, in terms of getting her job and then that leading into her future career in the energy industry. It's the same sort of principle. And I guess by setting up these dedicated internships, you're distributing these keys to certain demographics that need to be better represented.
I think that's a really good point, Naomi. I think it is very difficult to get into your chosen career, whatever career path you're in as well. I started my career in marketing a long time ago now, but it took me quite a time to get my first job in marketing. So I think that's a really good point. Setting up those paid internships would create those opportunities. Thank you all for joining me today for our special International Women's Day podcast. It's been really interesting hearing all your thoughts and experiences, and it's great to be able to shine a light on women in STEM and what more needs to be done.